Dr. Amelia Rodriguez had always been an early riser. At 5:30 a.m., while most of Atlanta was still sleeping, she was already in her home office, reading through emails and checking the previous day's reports from her company's 5 regional offices. TechFlow Solutions had grown far beyond what she had imagined when she started it 8 years ago from her garage. Back then, she was just a computer science graduate with big dreams and a small savings account. Today, her company employed over 400 people and provided technology consulting services to major corporations across the Southeast. But success hadn't made her forget where she came from, or the struggles she faced building her business from nothing. She scrolled through her laptop. One particular report caught her attention. The Atlanta office, her largest branch, was showing declining customer satisfaction scores for the 3rd month in a row. Client complaints had increased by 40%, and 2 major contracts had been lost to competitors in recent weeks. This wasn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet. Each lost client represented jobs at risk and damage to the reputation she had worked so hard to build. Amelia leaned back in her leather chair and rubbed her temples. She had hired David Thompson as the regional manager for the Atlanta office 3 years ago. His resume was impressive, and he had come with strong recommendations from his previous company. During interviews, he had said all the right things about teamwork, customer service, and company culture. But something wasn't adding up between his promises and the reality of what was happening in that office. The morning sun was starting to filter through her office windows as she made a decision that would change everything. Instead of scheduling another formal meeting or sending another email asking for explanations, she would drive to the Atlanta office herself. Not for an announced inspection or a planned meeting, but as a surprise visit to see what was really going on. She had learned this approach from her mentor, Mrs. Chen, an elderly Chinese woman who had owned a successful restaurant chain. Mrs. Chen had taught her that you could learn more about your business in 10 minutes of unannounced observation than in hours of scheduled meetings and prepared presentations. People acted differently when they thought the boss was watching. Amelia chose her outfit carefully that morning. Instead of her usual business suit and heels, she put on a simple navy blazer, dark jeans, and comfortable flats. She tied her long, black hair back in a simple ponytail and wore minimal makeup. She wanted to blend in, to see her office through the eyes of a regular visitor rather than announce herself as the CEO from the moment she walked through the door. The drive to downtown Atlanta took about 40 minutes in the morning traffic. As she sat in her car, moving slowly through the busy streets, Amelia thought about the early days of her company. She remembered the countless nights spent coding, the rejected loan applications, and the investors who had doubted whether a young woman could run a successful tech company. There had been times when she wondered if they were right, but her father's words had always pushed her forward. He had immigrated to the United States with nothing but hope and determination, working 2 jobs to put himself through night school, and eventually becoming an engineer. He had taught her that success wasn't about where you started, but about how hard you were willing to work and how you treated people along the way. The Atlanta office was located in a gleaming glass tower in the heart of the business district. Amelia had chosen this location carefully when the company expanded. She wanted TechFlow Solutions to have a presence that reflected its success and ambitions. The rent was expensive, but the address commanded respect from clients and competitors alike. As she pulled into the parking garage, Amelia felt a mix of emotions. Pride in how far her company had come, concern about the problems she needed to solve, and curiosity about what she would discover during her unannounced visit. She had no idea that this ordinary Tuesday morning would become one of the most significant days in her company's history. Walking through the underground garage toward the elevators, she noticed how clean and well-maintained everything looked. The building management took good care of the property, which was one of the reasons she had chosen this location. First impressions mattered in business, and she wanted every client who visited her office to feel confident about the company they were working with. The elevator ride to the 15th floor gave her a few moments to collect her thoughts. She wasn't planning to cause trouble or catch anyone doing something wrong. She simply wanted to understand why her most successful office was suddenly struggling. Maybe there were problems she wasn't aware of, challenges that weren't being communicated up the chain of command. As the elevator numbers climbed higher, Amelia thought about her employees. TechFlow Solutions employed people from all different backgrounds and walks of life. She had always prided herself on creating an inclusive workplace where talent mattered more than anything else. Some of her best developers had come from non-traditional backgrounds, and several of her most successful managers had started as entry-level employees and worked their way up. The elevator doors opened onto the 15th floor, and Amelia stepped out into the hallway that led to her company's offices. The TechFlow Solutions logo was prominently displayed on the wall, and through the glass doors she could see the familiar bustle of a busy office. Employees were at their desks, phones were ringing, and the energy looked positive from the outside. She paused for a moment before walking toward the entrance. This was her company, her dream made real, and every person working behind those glass doors was part of the success she had built. Whatever problems existed, she was confident they could be solved. After all, she had overcome much bigger challenges in the past. Taking a deep breath, Amelia walked toward the reception area, ready to begin her investigation into what was really happening in her Atlanta office. She had no way of knowing that. The next few minutes would reveal problems far more serious than declining customer satisfaction scores or lost contracts. She was about to discover that the company culture she thought she had built was not what she believed it to be. The morning was still young, and the real story was just beginning to unfold. The glass doors of TechFlow Solutions opened with a soft whoosh as Amelia stepped into the reception area. The space looked exactly as she remembered from her last official visit 6 months ago. Modern furniture, the company's values displayed on the wall in elegant lettering, and soft jazz music playing. In the background, everything seemed normal on the surface. The reception desk was positioned directly in front of the entrance, and behind it sat a woman Amelia didn't immediately recognize. She appeared to be in her early 40s with short blonde hair and a crisp white blouse. Her nameplate read, Patricia Wells, Office Manager. Amelia made a mental note that this must be the new hire David Thompson had mentioned in his reports. Patricia was focused on her computer screen, typing rapidly while speaking into a wireless headset. She seemed busy and professional, which was exactly what Amelia wanted to see in her front office. First impressions were crucial in the consulting business, and clients needed to feel confident from the moment they walked through the door. Amelia approached the desk quietly, not wanting to interrupt the phone call. She looked around the reception area while she waited, noticing that the company awards and certifications were properly displayed and that the furniture was clean and well arranged. At least the physical space was being maintained according to company standards. After a few moments, Patricia finished her call and looked up. Her expression immediately changed from professional courtesy to something that made Amelia uncomfortable. It was a look she had seen before in various situations throughout her career, a combination of surprise and judgment that had nothing to do with business. "Can I help you?" Patricia asked, her tone polite but noticeably cooler than the warm greeting Amelia had heard her give to whoever was on the phone. "Good morning," Amelia replied with a smile. "I'm here to speak with the management team. Is David Thompson available?" Patricia's eyes moved up and down, taking in Amelia's casual outfit and simple appearance. The look lasted only a few seconds, but it felt much longer. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked, pulling up what appeared to be a calendar on her computer screen. "No, I don't, but I'm sure David will want to see me when he knows I'm here." "I'm sorry, but Mr. Thompson is very busy today," Patricia said, not even checking the calendar she had just opened. "He doesn't take unscheduled meetings. If you'd like to schedule something for next week, I can put you on his calendar." Amelia felt the first stirring of irritation but kept her voice calm and professional. "I think there might be some confusion. I'm Amelia Rodriguez. I'm the—" "Ma'am," Patricia interrupted, holding up her hand in a gesture that made Amelia stop, mid-sentence. "I don't know who you think you are, but this is a place of business. We don't allow solicitors or delivery people beyond the reception area without proper authorization." The words hit Amelia like a physical blow. Solicitors? Delivery people? She looked down at her outfit, wondering if somehow her choice to dress casually had been a mistake. But even in jeans and a blazer, she looked professional and presentable. Nothing about her appearance should have suggested she was anything other than a business professional. I'm not a solicitor, Amelia said, her voice remaining steady, despite the growing anger she felt inside. I'm the owner of this company. If you would just let me explain— Look, lady, Patricia said, her tone becoming more aggressive. I don't know what kind of scam you're trying to pull, but it's not going to work here. The owner of TechFlow Solutions is a very important person who doesn't just show up unannounced. You need to leave now, or I'm going to call security. Amelia stood there in shock, unable to believe what was happening. In her own office, in the company she had built from nothing, she was being treated like a criminal. The irony was almost too much to comprehend. She had worried about customer satisfaction scores and lost contracts, but she hadn't even considered that her own employees might not know who she was, or might refuse to believe her when she told them. Behind Patricia, she could see other employees going about their work. A few had noticed the conversation at the reception desk and were watching with curious expressions. None of them seemed inclined to intervene or help clarify the situation. Some looked uncomfortable, as if they recognized that something wasn't right, but they remained at their desks. I understand this might seem unusual, Amelia said, reaching into her purse to pull out her business card. But if you'll just look at this, you'll see that I'm telling the truth. I'm Amelia Rodriguez, the CEO and founder of TechFlow Solutions. Patricia glanced at the business card but barely looked at it before handing it back. Anyone can have business cards printed, she said dismissively. Do you think I was born yesterday? Real executives don't show up looking like they're going to clean offices. The comment about cleaning offices stung more than anything else Patricia had said. Amelia thought about her father, who had worked as a janitor while putting himself through engineering school. There was nothing wrong with honest work of any kind. But the implication behind Patricia's words was clear. She had made assumptions based on Amelia's appearance and ethnicity, assumptions that had nothing to do with competence or authority. From across the office, she saw David Thompson emerge from what she knew was the regional manager's office. He was a tall man in his 50s with graying hair and an expensive suit. He had been walking toward the reception area, but when he saw the conversation taking place, he slowed his pace and seemed to be listening. David, Amelia called out, hoping he would recognize her and put an end to this humiliating situation. Could you come over here for a moment? David looked at her with the same confused expression as Patricia. He approached slowly, and when he reached the reception desk, he looked to Patricia for an explanation rather than acknowledging Amelia directly. This woman is claiming to be the owner of the company, Patricia explained to David as if Amelia wasn't standing right there. She doesn't have an appointment, and she's refusing to leave when I asked her to. David studied Amelia's face for a moment, and she could see him trying to place where he might have seen her before, but instead of recognition, his expression showed only uncertainty and mild annoyance. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises, David said in an authoritative tone. This is a private business, and we can't have unauthorized people disrupting our work environment. If you have legitimate business here, you can schedule an appointment through proper channels. Amelia felt her heart racing as the full impact of the situation became clear. Not only was she not being recognized as the company's owner, but she was being actively ejected from her own office by her own employees. The people she paid, the people whose jobs existed because of the company she had built, were treating her like an unwelcome intruder. Around the office, more employees had stopped working and were watching the scene unfold. Some looked embarrassed by what they were witnessing, while others seemed to agree with Patricia and David's handling of the situation. But not one person spoke up to defend her or suggest that there might be more to the story than what appeared on the surface. I'll leave, Amelia said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. But this conversation isn't over. As she turned and walked back toward the glass doors, she could hear Patricia and David talking behind her in low voices. She caught fragments of their conversation, words like nerve and security and some people. Each word felt like another blow to her dignity and her sense of who she thought she was in the world. The elevator ride down to the parking garage felt like the longest 15 floors of her life. Amelia stood alone in the small space, staring at her reflection in the polished metal doors. The woman looking back at her was the same person who had built a successful company, who had overcome countless obstacles, who had earned the respect of clients and competitors alike. But in her own office, that woman had been invisible. Amelia sat in her car in the parking garage, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles had turned white. The engine was off, but she couldn't bring herself to drive away just yet. Everything that had just happened felt like a bad dream, except she was wide awake and the humiliation was very real. She looked at herself in the rearview mirror, trying to understand what Patricia and David had seen when they looked at her. Was it really just about her casual clothes? She had worn similar outfits to other business meetings and never been treated with such disrespect. Deep down, she knew the truth was more complicated and more painful than a simple dress code misunderstanding. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her assistant, Rebecca, asking about her schedule for the afternoon. The normal world was continuing around her, but Amelia felt like she was stuck in this underground garage, processing something that had shaken her to her core. She had built her entire identity around being a successful business owner, and in the span of 10 minutes, that identity had been completely dismissed. The worst part wasn't even the personal humiliation, though that stung deeply. It was the realization of what this meant for her company and her employees. If this was how the Atlanta office operated, how many clients had experienced similar treatment? How many talented job candidates had been turned away because they didn't fit someone's narrow idea of what a business professional should look like? Amelia thought about her own journey to success. She remembered the early days when venture capitalists would look right past her in meetings, addressing their questions to her male business partner, even though she was the one with the technical expertise. She remembered the clients who seemed surprised when she showed up to presentations as if they had expected someone different. She had worked twice as hard as many of her competitors to prove herself, and she thought those days were behind her. But here she was, in 2024, being treated like an intruder in her own company. It wasn't just about her anymore. This was about every employee who worked for TechFlow Solutions and every client who trusted them with their business. The culture in that office was poisonous, and as the CEO, she was responsible for allowing it to exist. She pulled out her phone and started making calls. The first was to her general counsel, Michael Kim, a sharp lawyer who had helped her navigate several difficult business situations over the years. When he answered, she could hear the concern in his voice immediately. "Amelia? You sound upset. What's going on?" She told him everything that had happened, speaking slowly and carefully to make sure she didn't leave out any details. Michael listened, without interrupting, occasionally asking clarifying questions about what was said and who was present. By the time she finished, her voice was steadier, but the anger was still burning inside her. "This is serious," Michael said when she was done. "Beyond the obvious discrimination issues, this represents a complete breakdown in management and company culture. We need to document everything while it's fresh in your memory, and we need to act quickly." "I want them gone," Amelia said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "Patricia, David, and anyone else who was involved or who witnessed this and did nothing. I won't tolerate this kind of behavior in my company." "I understand your anger and frankly I share it," Michael replied. "But we need to do this properly. We'll need HR involved, we'll need to follow proper termination procedures, and we'll need to make sure we're protected legally. Can you meet me at my office in an hour?" After hanging up with Michael, Amelia called her head of human resources, Linda Park. Linda had been with the company for 4 years and had helped establish many of the policies and procedures that Amelia thought were protecting her employees from exactly this kind of treatment. "Linda, I need you to pull the personnel files for the Atlanta office, particularly Patricia Wells and David Thompson. I also need you to review any complaints or issues that have been reported from that location in the past year." "Of course," Linda said, though Amelia could hear the confusion in her voice. "May I ask what this is about?" Amelia explained the situation again, and Linda's reaction was immediate and strong. "Oh my God, Amelia. I'm so sorry this happened to you. This is completely unacceptable. I'll start pulling those files right now, and I'll also check if there have been any similar incidents that weren't properly reported up the chain." The third call was to her assistant, Rebecca, to clear her schedule for the rest of the day. She didn't go into details, but she asked Rebecca to arrange an emergency meeting with the company's senior leadership team for later that afternoon. Whatever happened next, She wanted her core team to understand the situation and be prepared for the changes that were coming. Sitting in the quiet of her car, Amelia began to think about the bigger picture. TechFlow Solutions employed over 400 people across 5 offices. How many of those employees were experiencing discrimination or bias that never made it to her attention? How many talented people had they lost because of toxic managers like David, or gatekeepers like Patricia? She thought about her responsibility as a leader. She had always believed that building a successful company meant creating opportunities for others, regardless of their background or where they came from. But if she was being honest with herself, she had become somewhat removed from the day-to-day operations of her regional offices. She had trusted her managers to uphold the company's values, but clearly, that trust had been misplaced. The realization hit her that this incident was actually a gift, even though it didn't feel like one. Without this unannounced visit, she might never have known what was really happening in her Atlanta office. The declining customer satisfaction scores suddenly made perfect sense. If this was how employees treated the company's own CEO, how were they treating clients who didn't fit their expectations? Amelia started her car and began the drive to Michael's law office. As she navigated through Atlanta traffic, she felt her shock and hurt transforming into something more powerful: determination. She had built this company to be better than the places that had discriminated against her, and she wasn't going to let a few toxic employees destroy what she had worked so hard to create. Her phone rang through the car's Bluetooth system. It was David Thompson. For a moment she considered not answering, but curiosity got the better of her. "This is Amelia. Ms. Rodriguez?" David's voice sounded nervous and uncertain. "This is David Thompson from the Atlanta office. I was just calling to... Well, someone here showed me your photo from the company website, and I think there may have been a misunderstanding earlier today." Amelia felt a bitter laugh rise in her throat. "A misunderstanding? Is that what you're calling it? I want to apologize for any confusion. If you'd like to come back, I'm sure we can..." "David," Amelia interrupted, "don't say another word. You'll be hearing from HR and legal very soon. This conversation is over." She hung up before he could respond. The fact that he was calling now, only after someone had shown him her picture, proved that his treatment of her had nothing to do with company policies or security concerns. It had been pure prejudice, and his panicked phone call just confirmed it. By the time she reached the law office, Amelia had made her decision. This wasn't just about firing a few problematic employees. This was about rebuilding the culture of her company from the ground up, starting with the Atlanta office. She was going to make sure that what happened to her never happened to anyone else in her organization. The real work was just beginning. 2 hours later, Amelia returned to the gleaming glass tower that housed her Atlanta office. This time she wasn't alone. Walking beside her were 3 people who would help ensure that what happened next was handled properly and legally. Michael Kim, her general counsel, carried a leather briefcase and wore the serious expression of someone preparing for battle. Linda Park from HR had a tablet in her hand with employee files and company policies readily accessible. And Rebecca, her executive assistant, had a notebook ready to document everything that was about to unfold. The group also included James Wilson, the building's head of security, whom Michael had contacted to ensure there would be no confusion about Amelia's right to access her own office. James had been shocked when he learned what had happened earlier and had immediately agreed to accompany them back upstairs. As they rode the elevator to the 15th floor, Amelia felt completely different than she had that morning. Gone was the casual outfit and simple ponytail. She now wore a sharp black business suit. Her hair was styled professionally, and she carried herself with the unmistakable authority of someone who owned everything around her. But more importantly, she felt the support of her team and the strength that came from knowing she was doing the right thing. "Remember," Michael said quietly as the elevator climbed, "we're going to be professional and factual. We'll state what happened, explain the consequences, and move forward. No personal attacks, no emotional outbursts. We let the facts speak for themselves." Amelia nodded. She had spent the last 2 hours not just planning this confrontation, but also learning disturbing things about her Atlanta office that she wished she had known sooner. Linda had found several unreported incidents in employee exit interviews, complaints that had been buried by David's management team, and evidence of a toxic workplace culture that went far beyond what Amelia had experienced that morning. Chai. Elevator doors opened, and immediately Amelia could see that word of her identity had spread throughout the office. Employees who had been at their desks that morning were now standing in small groups, whispering and looking nervous. The energy in the office was completely different from the calm productivity she had observed earlier. Patricia was still at her reception desk, but her confident demeanor from the morning had vanished. When she saw Amelia approaching with the group of professionals, her face went pale and her hands started trembling. She clearly recognized that this was not going to be a simple misunderstanding that could be smoothed over with an apology. "Good afternoon, Patricia," Amelia said, her voice calm but carrying unmistakable authority. "I believe we met this morning, though you didn't give me the opportunity to properly introduce myself. I'm Dr. Amelia Rodriguez, CEO and founder of TechFlow Solutions." Patricia's mouth opened and closed several times, but no words came out. Behind her, David Thompson had emerged from his office and was walking quickly toward the reception area. His earlier phone call had clearly not gone as he had hoped, and the sight of Amelia returning with lawyers and HR personnel had obviously confirmed his worst fears. "Ms. Rodriguez," David said, his voice shaking slightly as he approached. "I want to apologize for this morning's incident. There was clearly a communication breakdown, and I take full responsibility for—" "David," Amelia interrupted, holding up her hand in the same dismissive gesture Patricia had used on her that morning. "I appreciate that you want to apologize, but we're past that point now. What happened this morning wasn't a communication breakdown, it was discrimination, pure and simple." She looked around the office, making eye contact with the employees who were watching the scene unfold. Some looked ashamed. Others seemed relieved that someone was finally addressing problems they had witnessed, but felt powerless to stop. "I'd like to call an all-staff meeting," Amelia announced, her voice carrying clearly across the office. "Every employee in this office in the main conference room right now. This affects everyone, and everyone needs to hear what I have to say." Linda stepped forward and began directing employees toward the conference room, while Michael positioned himself near David and Patricia to ensure they didn't try to leave or interfere with the proceedings. Rebecca took notes on everything that was happening, creating a record that would be important for the legal and HR processes that would follow. As employees filed into the conference room, Amelia could see a range of emotions on their faces. Some looked curious, others worried, and a few seemed to know exactly what was coming. She recognized several faces from company newsletters and previous visits, but she also realized how many employees she didn't know personally. That was something she would need to change going forward. Once everyone was gathered, Amelia stood at the front of the room and looked out at the faces of people whose livelihoods depended on the company she had built. These were good people, for the most part, who had been working under bad leadership. What happened next would determine not just their immediate futures, but the future culture of TechFlow Solutions. "I want to tell you about what happened to me this morning," Amelia began, her voice steady and clear. "I came to this office for an unannounced visit to understand why our customer satisfaction scores have been declining. I dressed casually because I wanted to observe our normal operations without the usual preparation that happens when the CEO visits." She could see employees shifting uncomfortably in their seats, particularly those who had been present that morning and had witnessed her treatment at the reception desk. "When I arrived, I was told by Patricia Wells that I looked like a solicitor or delivery person. I was refused entry to my own office, dismissed when I tried to explain who I was, and ultimately asked to leave the building." David Thompson, when he became involved, supported Patricia's decision and personally escorted me out. The room was completely silent. Some employees were looking down at their hands, while others stared at Patricia and David with expressions of disbelief or disgust. "This wasn't just about me," Amelia continued. "What happened this morning revealed a culture problem in this office that I should have identified and addressed long ago. If this is how my own employees treat me, I can only imagine how clients and job candidates who don't fit certain expectations have been treated. She paused to let that sink in before continuing. Since this morning, HR has been reviewing files and conducting interviews. We've discovered that this wasn't an isolated incident. There have been complaints, there have been problems, and there have been people leaving our company because of the toxic environment that some individuals have created here. David tried to interrupt. Ms. Rodriguez, if I could just explain. You've had your chance to explain, Amelia said firmly. 3 years of chances, actually. The time for explanations is over. She looked around the room again, making sure she had everyone's attention. Effective immediately, Patricia Wells and David Thompson are terminated from TechFlow Solutions. Their behavior this morning and the pattern of behavior that led to this morning is completely unacceptable and goes against everything this company stands for. The reaction in the room was immediate. Some employees looked relieved. Others seemed shocked by the swiftness of the decision, and a few appeared nervous about what other changes might be coming. I also want to address those of you who witnessed what happened this morning and chose to say nothing, Amelia continued. I understand that speaking up against your managers takes courage, and I don't expect everyone to be heroes. But going forward, this company will have better systems in place to report problems and protect employees who raise concerns. Patricia had started crying quietly, and David looked like he wanted to argue, but had finally realized that nothing he could say would change the outcome. Security personnel were already prepared to escort them from the building once the meeting concluded. For everyone else, Amelia said, her tone becoming more positive, this is the beginning of a new chapter for this office. We're going to rebuild the culture here based on respect, professionalism, and the values that TechFlow Solutions was founded on. There will be opportunities for advancement, better training programs, and a workplace where everyone is treated with dignity regardless of what they look like or where they come from. The meeting lasted another 30 minutes as Amelia outlined the immediate changes that would be implemented and answered questions from employees. By the time it was over, the energy in the room had shifted from anxiety to cautious optimism. As Patricia and David were escorted from the building, Amelia felt a mixture of sadness and relief. Sadness that it had come to this, but relief that she had finally addressed a problem that had been poisoning her company from within. The real work of rebuilding would start tomorrow, but today had been about taking a stand for the values she believed in. 3 weeks after that Tuesday morning, that changed everything. Amelia stood in the same Atlanta office, but the atmosphere was completely different. The tension and underlying hostility that she now realized had been present for months was gone, replaced by an energy that felt genuinely positive and productive. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. In the days immediately following Patricia and David's termination, several other employees had come forward with stories about the toxic culture that had been festering in the office. A senior developer named Carlos had been passed over for promotions despite excellent performance reviews. A young black woman in client services had been consistently given the most difficult accounts while watching less qualified colleagues get easier assignments and better recognition. An older Asian man in accounting had been subjected to jokes about his accent and had his ideas dismissed in meetings. Amelia had spent countless hours over the past 3 weeks meeting individually with every employee in the Atlanta office. She had listened to their experiences, their frustrations, and their ideas for making the workplace better. Some conversations had been difficult, but all of them had been necessary. She had also made it clear that anyone who felt they couldn't adapt to the new culture was free to leave with a generous severance package. 3 managers had taken that offer, admitting privately that they preferred the old way of doing things. But 32 employees had chosen to stay and be part of building something better. Those were the people Amelia was now focused on developing and supporting. The most significant change had been promoting Isabella Martinez to the position of regional manager. Isabella had been working as a senior project coordinator for 2 years, consistently receiving excellent reviews from clients and colleagues. She had a natural ability to bring out the best in people and had been quietly helping to resolve conflicts and support struggling team members, even when it wasn't part of her official job description. When Amelia had offered Isabella the promotion, She had been shocked. Under David's management, she had been told repeatedly that she wasn't leadership material and needed more experience before she could be considered for advancement. But her colleagues had nominated her unanimously when Amelia asked the staff who they thought would make the best manager. The hardest part, Isabella had told Amelia during one of their weekly check-ins, is helping people believe that things are really different now. Some of the team members are still waiting for everything to go back to the way it was before. Amelia understood that concern. Real cultural change took time, and some people had been disappointed by false promises of improvement before. That's why she had made the decision to spend one day each week working directly from the Atlanta office for the foreseeable future. Her presence sent a clear message that this wasn't just a temporary fix, but a fundamental shift in how the company operated. The results had been remarkable. Client satisfaction scores had improved dramatically as employees felt empowered to go above and beyond for customers, instead of just following rigid scripts designed to minimize effort. The office had landed 3 new major contracts in the past month, partly because clients had noticed the improved energy and professionalism during meetings and presentations, but the changes went beyond just business metrics. The office felt alive in a way it hadn't before. Employees were collaborating more effectively, sharing ideas freely, and supporting each other through challenges. The break room conversations were no longer dominated by complaints and gossip, but by genuine discussions about projects, career goals, and innovative solutions to client problems. Amelia had also implemented new policies across all 5 TechFlow Solutions offices based on what she had learned in Atlanta. Anonymous reporting systems had been established, so employees could raise concerns without fear of retaliation. Regular culture surveys would be conducted to identify problems before they became crises. And most importantly, all managers would receive mandatory training on unconscious bias and inclusive leadership. One of the most meaningful moments for Amelia had come 2 weeks into the transformation process. A young software engineer named Kevin, who was autistic and had been struggling under the previous management, had approached her during one of her Atlanta visits. "Ms. Rodriguez," he had said, clearly nervous but determined to speak. "I wanted to thank you for what you did. For the first time since I started working here, I feel like I can actually do my job without worrying about being judged for being different." Kevin's words had reminded Amelia why she had started TechFlow Solutions in the first place. It wasn't just about building a profitable business, though success was important. It was about creating opportunities for talented people who might not get a fair chance elsewhere. It was about proving that diverse teams weren't just morally right, but also more creative, more innovative, and more successful. The story of what had happened in Atlanta had spread throughout the company, and Amelia had been surprised by the response from her other offices. Instead of concern about job security or fear of increased scrutiny, she had received messages of support from employees who were proud to work for a company that took a stand against discrimination. One email that particularly touched her had come from a group of employees at the Dallas office. They had written to thank her for showing that TechFlow Solutions truly lived up to its stated values, and asked if they could implement some of the same cultural improvements in their location. Similar requests had come from the other regional offices, turning what could have been a company crisis into an opportunity for organization-wide improvement. The financial impact had been positive as well. Not only had the Atlanta office's performance improved, but TechFlow Solutions as a whole had seen an uptick in job applications from highly qualified candidates who had heard about the company's commitment to creating an inclusive workplace. Several major clients had also reached out to express their appreciation for the company's actions, with one Fortune 500 company specifically mentioning that they preferred to work with vendors who demonstrated strong ethical leadership. But perhaps the most important change was in Amelia herself. The experience had reminded her never to become complacent about company culture or assume that good intentions were enough to prevent problems. She had established new routines for staying connected to all levels of her organization and had committed to regularly visiting each office in an unofficial capacity to observe and listen. On this particular morning, as she walked through the Atlanta office, Amelia noticed details that filled her with hope. A diverse group of employees was collaborating on a presentation in the conference room, with everyone contributing ideas, and no one person dominating the discussion. The reception area, now staffed by Tony, a professional and welcoming man who treated every visitor with respect, had become a showcase for the company's inclusive values. Isabella approached her with a smile and a tablet full of updates on ongoing projects. "Good morning, Amelia. The client meeting with Morrison Industries went really well yesterday. They were so impressed with our team's presentation that they want to discuss expanding their contract." "That's fantastic news," Amelia replied. "How did the team feel about the presentation?" "Confident and proud," Isabella said. "It's amazing what people can accomplish when they know their contributions are valued and they don't have to worry about office politics or discrimination." As Amelia settled into her temporary workspace, she reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. The morning when she had been turned away from her own office had been one of the most humiliating experiences of her professional life. But it had also been a wake-up call that led to necessary changes that made TechFlow Solutions stronger and more successful than ever before. She had learned that being a leader meant more than just setting policies and checking financial reports. It meant creating an environment where every person could bring their best self to work, regardless of their background, appearance, or personal characteristics. It meant staying vigilant against the small prejudices and unconscious biases that could poison a workplace culture if left unchecked. Most importantly, she had learned that real change was possible when leaders were willing to take decisive action and follow through with sustained commitment. The Atlanta office was proof that even the most toxic workplace culture could be transformed when the right people were empowered and the wrong behaviors were clearly not tolerated. As she began her work for the day, Amelia felt grateful for the painful lesson that had led to this positive transformation. TechFlow Solutions was now truly the company she had always envisioned it could be.